It was a sunny afternoon when Grace walked slowly toward the large glass doors of Le Maison, the most expensive restaurant in the city. People came here to celebrate birthdays, business deals, and even engagements. The place was known, not just for its food, but for its luxury and its attitude. Grace wasn't wearing expensive clothes. She had on a plain grey sweater, faded jeans, and worn-out shoes. The moment she stepped into the lobby, a young man at the reception looked her up and down and raised an eyebrow. "Can I help you?" he asked, trying to hide a smirk. Grace smiled softly and said, "I'd like a table for one, please." The receptionist chuckled under his breath. "Do you have a reservation?" "No," she replied calmly. He looked her again from head to toe. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we're full tonight." Grace looked around. The restaurant was almost empty. "I can wait," she said politely. He leaned over and whispered something to the hostess next to him. They both giggled. "I'm sorry," the hostess said louder this time, "but this place is for fine dining. There's a cafe down the street. You might be more comfortable there." A few customers waiting nearby looked over. They saw what was happening, but no one said anything. Grace stood still. Her hands were calm. Her face didn't change, but her eyes, they were watching. Quiet. Deep. "Are you sure you can't find me a table?" she asked again. The manager, Mr. Thomas, walked over after noticing the small scene. A tall man in a black suit, clean-shaved and full of pride. "What's going on here?" he asked. "She's asking for a table," the hostess replied, "but she doesn't have a reservation." Mr. Thomas turned to Grace and gave a quick fake smile. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we have a dress code here, and we can't serve walk-ins without reservations." Grace nodded slowly. "I understand," she said. But before she turned to leave, she looked into Mr. Thomas's eyes and said softly, "It's always interesting how people treat someone before they know who they are." Mr. Thomas frowned. "What do you mean?" But Grace said nothing. She simply turned around and walked out the door. Behind her, the staff laughed again. "Who does she think she is?" the hostess said. "She's probably looking for leftovers," the receptionist joked. Nobody knew her name. Nobody cared. But outside the restaurant, Grace paused. She took out her phone and made a call. "Hi, it's me," she said quietly. "They don't remember me, but that's okay. I'll come tomorrow, as myself." She ended the call with a half smile. That night, the staff posted jokes on their private WhatsApp group. "Homeless woman tries to eat at La Maison. Someone get her a mirror and a clue." But what they didn't know was that the woman they laughed at didn't just help build this restaurant. She owned it. The next morning, news traveled fast inside the restaurant. The owner of their entire chain was visiting. Mr. Thomas stood straighter. The staff cleaned twice as fast. The kitchen worked in silence. They didn't know who was coming. But they were told, "Make no mistakes. Treat them like royalty." At exactly 12 p.m., a black Mercedes stopped in front of La Maison. A woman stepped out. This time, she wore a black suit, elegant heels, a soft silk scarf. Her walk was confident, calm, quiet. Mr. Thomas rushed to the door, his best smile ready. Then he froze. It was her. The same woman they laughed at the day before. The nobody they pushed out, the one they thought and didn't belong. Now she stood before them, her face composed, her eyes sharp. Grace looked at him and said simply, "Do you remember me?" Mr. Thomas stood frozen. He stared at Grace, his mouth slightly open. His hands trembled as he remembered the day before, the way he spoke to her, the way he laughed behind her back. Now she stood in front of him, calm, silent, powerful. He cleared his throat. Ma'am, I didn't recognize you yesterday." Grace smiled politely, but her eyes stayed cold. That's the point, isn't it? The staff who had mocked her yesterday were now whispering among themselves. "That's her. She's the owner. What do we do now?" Grace didn't say. Anything else? She walked past them as if nothing had happened and sat at the same table she had requested yesterday. Everything went quiet in the restaurant. The air felt heavier. Mr. Thomas hurried to her table. "Would you like the chef's special today? Or anything you prefer? It's all complimentary, of course." Grace looked up slowly. "No, I'll pay. I don't want special treatment. I just want to be served like anyone else." He nodded quickly, sweating. "Yes, of course, absolutely." As he walked away, the staff stared at Grace like she was someone out of a movie. But no one knew her full story. Not yet. Not even close. Flashback. 15 years ago, Grace grew up in a small town. Her parents worked hard just to keep food on the table. There were days when they couldn't afford dinner, but her mother always said, "Even if they laugh at you, you keep your head high. Your silence will speak louder than their words someday." At school, Grace was bullied. Her clothes were old. Her shoes were always too tight or falling apart. Kids whispered and laughed behind her back. Some teachers even ignored her hand when she raised it to answer questions, but Grace kept going. Quiet, focused. She didn't cry in front of them. She cried at night. She studied harder than anyone else. She worked part-time jobs cleaning, babysitting, and tutoring. She saved every penny. When she got into college, she didn't celebrate. She just packed her bags and promised herself, "One day, the world will hear my name." She didn't just go to college. She became top of her class. She studied business. She learned finance. She studied restaurant management, real estate, and leadership. But most of all, she studied people. Grace learned how people judge by looks, by money, by titles. She learned how they treat the nobodies differently than the somebodies, and that's when she made a decision. "I won't just build a business, I'll build a lesson." She started her first restaurant in a small corner building. No big signs, no flashy lights, just quality, honesty, and heart. It grew. One by one, more people came. Her ideas spread, and soon she owned one of the biggest restaurant chains in the country. La Maison was her 12th location, but she kept her face out of the media. She didn't need fame. She didn't want attention. She wanted the world to show its true face, without knowing who she was. Back to present day. As Grace ate her lunch quietly, Mr. Thomas kept looking at her from the corner of his eye. He couldn't sit still. Finally, he walked over. "Mom, I just want to say I'm truly sorry for yesterday." Grace looked at him. "Are you sorry because of who I am, or because of what you did?" He didn't know what to say. The silence was louder than any apology. Grace stood up, left her tip, and turned to leave. But before stepping out, she looked at the staff, who now stood still in shame. "I didn't come to punish anyone," she said. "I came to see," and then she left. The doors closed behind her, and everyone inside knew something big was about to happen. But no one could guess what. After Grace walked out of the restaurant that day, the staff couldn't stop talking. "Did you see the way she looked at us? She didn't even raise her voice. She's the owner of this place, and we treated her like dirt." Mr. Thomas sat in his office, hands on his head. His face was pale. He was the manager. He had been proud of how strict he was, about keeping standards that somehow never applied when it came to judging someone by appearance. He remembered exactly what he said to Grace when she came in the day before. "Mom, this isn't the kind of place you just walk into in street clothes. There's a dress code here." She had quietly explained she had a reservation. He laughed at her. Now he knew the truth. She owned the building, the business, and even his job. But Grace didn't fire anyone. She didn't yell. That silence, that power, was worse than any shouting could ever be. 2 days later, an email arrived at the restaurant. Subject: mandatory staff meeting, 9 a.m. sharp. Everyone was nervous. No one knew what was going to happen. When the time came, Every staff member stood quietly in the dining area, wearing clean uniforms and nervous faces. The doors opened. Grace walked in. But this time, she wasn't in her casual clothes. She wore a navy blue blazer, hair tied back, and carried a leather folder in one hand. The silence in the room was like a thick cloud. She stood in front of them and began to speak. Some of you might still not believe it. Yes, I am the owner of this restaurant, and 12 more like it, across the country. People shifted uncomfortably. When I came in here the other day, I didn't come as your boss. I came as a guest. And how I was treated says everything about the culture we've allowed here. She paused, scanning their faces. I built this business to be different, to be better, not just in food, but in respect, in how we treat every person who walks through our doors, rich or poor, black or white, dressed up or not. A young waiter looked down, ashamed. He had been one of the people who laughed. Grace continued. I grew up poor. People laughed at me too. I know what it feels like to be turned away just because of how you look. That's why I started this place. She opened the folder. Now, things are going to change. There will be new training, a new manager, new values. Mr. Thomas froze. Yes, Grace said, looking at him directly. You're no longer the manager. You'll receive your final pay by next week. He didn't argue. He just nodded. To the rest of you, Grace said, you have a choice. Stay and grow with us, or leave, if respect isn't something you can practice daily. The room was silent. Then one by one, a few staff members nodded. Some apologized. Others stood still. Grace nodded slowly. Good, because this place, it's not just about food, it's about people. Later that evening, Grace sat alone in her office, late at night. The restaurant lights were off. Everyone had gone home. She looked around the empty room, her dream restaurant, the one she had worked so hard to build. It was beautiful, but something felt broken inside. Not the walls, not the food, but the people. She had seen with her own eyes how her own staff treated someone they thought didn't belong. That night, she made a decision. I'm going to stay here for the next 2 weeks, she said, to herself. Not as the owner, but as one of them. She wouldn't tell anyone, not the customers, not the staff. She would work at the front desk, help in the kitchen, maybe even sweep the floors. She needed to see for herself. Had anything really changed? Day 1, disguised as Grace the hostess. The next morning, Grace arrived before anyone else. She wore simple clothes, no jewelry, no makeup, just jeans, a clean shirt, and a smile. She told the new manager, a kind young woman named Carla, that she wanted to work undercover as a regular staff member. Carla agreed. They need to learn, and this is the only way they'll truly change, Carla said. So Grace started greeting customers, taking reservations, and even serving water. Some staff were polite. Some still gave cold looks. Old habits die hard. Day 3. Trouble returns. On the third day, a couple walked in. The man wore an expensive suit. The woman had a diamond necklace and loud voice. They looked at Grace, standing behind the counter, and frowned. Is this who's greeting people now? The woman said loudly. No offense, but we expected a little more class. Grace smiled gently. Your table is ready, ma'am. She led them to their seats without another word. But something shifted in the air. A waiter nearby heard it all and rolled his eyes. Here we go again, he whispered. Grace noticed him. He was new, a young man named Luis. After the couple was seated, Luis approached her quietly. I heard what they said. That wasn't okay. Grace nodded. What would you have done? She asked him. Luis thought for a moment. Treated them with respect, but also stood up for you. Grace smiled. That's the right answer. She was starting to believe there was still hope. Day 5. The surprise inspection. That Friday, the restaurant was busy. Everyone was rushing. Orders were flying in. The kitchen was loud. Suddenly, a man in a suit walked in holding a clipboard. "Health inspection," he said. The staff froze. The last time they had a surprise check, it had gone badly. But this time, something was different. Grace stood back, watching. Luis helped the inspector with kindness. Carla answered every question. Clearly, even the kitchen staff worked like a team. The inspector walked over to Grace, who was still playing the role of a hostess. "You work here?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "This place is running smoother than most I've seen. Someone trained you all very well." Grace smiled. "Thank you, sir. We've had a recent shift." That night after closing, Grace called a staff meeting. Everyone gathered. Some looked nervous. Some looked curious. She stood in front of them and slowly removed her name tag. "My name isn't just Grace. I am that Grace. The one who owns this restaurant." Gasps filled the room. Some people looked shocked. Others looked ashamed. "For the past 5 days, I've worked beside you," she said. "I wanted to see if things had changed. If you had changed." She paused. "And the truth is, many of you have. You treated me better than before. You helped each other. You stood up when things went wrong." She looked at Luis. "And some of you have become the heart of this place." Luis smiled, a little embarrassed. Grace turned to the others. "But the test isn't over, because true change takes time. So, here's what happens next." After Grace revealed her identity, the restaurant felt different. Some staff were proud, some were quiet, and a few were scared. They remembered how they treated her when they thought she was just a worker. Now, they didn't know what would happen next. Would she fire them? Would she shut the restaurant down? Grace saw the fear in their eyes. She took a deep breath and spoke calmly. "I didn't come here to punish anyone," she said. "I came here because I wanted to understand." Everyone listened. We all make mistakes, but what matters is what we do next. She looked at each person in the room. "So today, I'm giving this team something rare, something most people never get. A second chance. New rules, new start. From the very next day, things changed." Grace put up a sign near the front door. It was simple, but powerful. "Respect is our recipe." No matter who came through that door, rich, poor, black, white, young, old, they were to be treated with dignity. Grace also introduced a customer kindness report. Every week, staff would vote on who showed the most kindness, to both co-workers and customers. The winner would get a small bonus and a badge of honor. Heart of the house. At first, people thought it was just a cute idea, but soon, something amazing happened. The staff begins to transform. Luis became a leader in the kitchen. He helped the new dishwasher when she was struggling, without anyone asking. Carla, the manager, made it her mission to train every new staff member in how to treat people, not just how to serve food. Even old Grumpy Tom, the senior chef, started saying please and thank you more often. And customers, they noticed. Online reviews went from average to glowing. One review read, "I walked in expecting good food. I walked out feeling like family." Grace read that review and smiled. But not everyone was happy. In the middle of all the positive changes, one person was not adjusting well. Marcus, the server who had laughed at Grace during her first visit, was growing bitter. He thought Grace would forget what he had done, but deep down, he knew she hadn't. And the more people praised Luis or Carla, the more Marcus felt left behind. One day, he cornered Luis in the kitchen. "So what? You're the boss's favorite now," he sneered. Luis stayed calm. "It's not about being her favorite. It's about doing the right thing." "Easy for you to say," Marcus replied. "You didn't mess up." He stormed off. But what he didn't know was that Grace had heard the whole conversation. A quiet conversation. Later that night, Grace found Marcus sitting alone behind the restaurant. She walked over and sat beside him. "Rough day?" she asked. Marcus didn't answer at first. Then he finally said, "I know I was wrong. I was rude. I judged you without knowing who you were." Grace nodded. "Yes, you did. But I believe people can grow." "Do you?" Marcus looked at her, surprised. "You'd still give me a chance?" Grace smiled. "Only if you're ready to earn it." He nodded slowly. "I am." The return of the mystery woman. Just as things were settling down, something unexpected happened. One quiet afternoon, a woman walked in. She wore sunglasses, a wide hat, and a calm expression. She looked around, then walked up to the front desk. "Is Grace here?" she asked. The hostess called Grace, who arrived moments later. When Grace saw the woman, her eyes widened. "You—" It was the same woman who had once turned her away with laughter. The same woman who said she didn't belong. Why was she back? What did she want? And most of all, was she here to apologize or to cause more trouble? Grace stood frozen at the front of the restaurant. The woman in front of her wasn't just a customer. She was the one who laughed at Grace, the one who told her she wasn't fancy enough to eat here. Back when Grace came in wearing simple clothes and asked for a table, this woman was the one who whispered to the host, shook her head, and smirked. Now she was back. But this time, she wasn't smiling. A strange request. The woman removed her sunglasses and looked around nervously. "Grace," she said quietly, "can we talk? In private?" Everyone around paused. The staff stopped what they were doing. Carla, the manager, took a step forward, ready to intervene, but Grace nodded. "It's all right. Follow me." They walked to Grace's small office in the back of the restaurant. The door closed. Silence filled the room. Grace crossed her arms. "Why are you here?" The woman looked down. "I wanted to apologize for what I did that day." Grace raised an eyebrow. "Why now?" The truth comes out. The woman sighed and sat down. "My name is Eleanor. That day, I was having the worst day of my life. My husband had just left me. I was angry, bitter, and I took it out on you. But when I saw the news, when I saw who you really were, I felt ashamed." She looked Grace in the eyes. "You didn't deserve that. You were kind, and I judged you based on your appearance. I'm sorry." Grace listened quietly. Eleanor reached into her purse and pulled out a letter. "I'm also here to ask for a job." Grace blinked, stunned. "A job?" "Yes," Eleanor said. "I used to be a restaurant manager. I lost that job months ago. I've applied everywhere, but no one will hire me. I didn't come to beg. I came to ask for a second chance, like the one you gave your team." The team reacts. Later that evening, Grace called a meeting. She explained what Eleanor had said and asked the team what they thought. There was silence at first. Then Carla spoke. "People can change. You gave us that chance. Why not her?" Luis nodded. "Let her prove herself, but she'll have to earn it." Even Marcus, who had just recently found his own redemption, added, "Sometimes the people who fall the hardest rise the highest." Grace smiled. "All right then. She'll start tomorrow. Front of house, under your training, Carla. Starting." Over the next morning, Eleanor returned. She wore a simple black uniform, her hair tied neatly, and a look of quiet determination on her face. Her first customer was an elderly black couple. She greeted them with respect, guided them to a table, and offered them water. "Welcome," she said. "It's an honor to serve you." She glanced at Grace from across the room. Grace gave her a small nod. Eleanor worked hard. The restaurant was full. Every table was taken. People weren't just coming for the food now, they were coming for the story. Some wanted to see Grace, the woman who forgave someone who once humiliated her. Others came to stare at Eleanor, the woman who once laughed at a stranger and now worked under her. But no one knew what was about to happen that night. Not even Grace. An unexpected visit. It was almost closing time. Grace was in the kitchen, helping wash dishes, when Carla rushed in. "You need to come to the front now." Grace wiped her hands and walked to the dining area. Then she froze. Sitting at the last table near the window was Mr. Langston, Grace's former boss. The same man who fired her without a second thought when a customer complained about her appearance. The same man who said, "You don't belong in this kind of business." He was wearing a sharp suit. His eyes scanned the restaurant like he was inspecting it. Grace approached slowly. "Mr. Langston, what brings you here?" He smiled faintly. "I came to see if the rumors were true." Old wounds for a moment. It was just silence. Mr. Langston looked around again, then said, "You built this, after everything?" "Yes," Grace replied calmly. He nodded, then said something she didn't expect. "I was wrong about you." Grace blinked. "Excuse me?" "You were always smart, always kind, but I didn't see your strength back then. That was my mistake." He leaned forward. "I came here to offer you a deal. Franchise your brand, expand it, with me as your partner." Everyone near the table pretended not to be listening, but their eyes were locked on the scene. A bigger decision. Grace looked at the contract he placed on the table. It promised money, growth, fame, but it also meant giving control to the same man who once told her she'd never make it. Grace didn't speak right away. Instead, she looked around at her staff, people she had given second chances to. She saw Carla, who now managed the floor like a pro. Luis, the quiet chef who once doubted himself, now leading a team in the kitchen. And Eleanor, taking orders at table 5, smiling as a customer shook her hand. Then she looked at Mr. Langston. "I appreciate the offer," she said, "but I already have a team, and we're building this on our own. The power of one choice." That night, Eleanor approached Grace after closing. "Why did you turn him down? He could have made you a millionaire." Grace smiled. "Because respect is worth more than money. He didn't believe in me when it mattered, but you all did, even when you made mistakes." She looked around. "This isn't just a restaurant. It's proof that people can grow, that people can change. And no contract can buy that." A letter from a stranger. 2 days later, Grace received a handwritten letter. It was from a teenage girl named Maya in another state. She wrote, "I saw your story online. I'm 16. I've been bullied because of my skin color. I was starting to lose hope. But watching you stand tall, watching you forgive, it gave me strength. Thank you for showing me what dignity looks like." Tears welled up in Grace's eyes as she read the final line. "Someday, I want to be like you." Full circle months passed. The restaurant became even more popular. Grace was invited to speak at schools and community centers. Eleanor became a senior staff member, known for her kindness. She had truly changed. And on a quiet Sunday, an older couple came in. They looked around, smiling. Grace walked over and asked, "Would you like a table?" The woman smiled. "Actually, we'd like your table, the one near the window. We've heard so much about this place." Grace smiled and led them to the same table where she once sat, unseen and unwanted. But now, it was the most requested table in the house.